Hello everyone and welcome back to my video. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the old meta of Smash Ultimate to see how those characters hold up today. Now, there's not a super easy way to gauge what the old meta of Ultimate was like, but what I've done is I've taken the first ever PGR and I've looked at the 10 most popular characters on that PGR, and we're going to be looking at how they're doing in current meta. Also, I just didn't mention this in the intro, but at the end of the video, I'm going to be ranking all 10 characters and seeing which one is the best in the current meta. So let's talk about our most popular characters. The first one is going to be Lucina with 7 reps. You only had 2 people maining Lucina, but you had 5 people using her as a secondary. You're going to have Snake with 6 reps, 2 people maining him. You're going to have Peach with 5 reps, 3 people maining her. You're going to have Wolf with 5 reps, 1 person maining him. You're going to have Inkling with 5 reps, 2 people maining him. You're going to have Palutena with 5 reps, 3 Palu mains, 5 Jokers, 1 Joker main, 4 Pichus, 3 Pichu mains, 4 Warios, 2 Wario mains, and then there was a tie between a bunch of characters for how many had 3 reps, but I ended up going with Amar because all of the reps not only used him as a main, but they were also all ranked in the top 20. Now that we have our 10 characters, we can figure out why these characters are less prevalent, if they are less prevalent, as well as their current best players. And we're going to start off with Pichu because this is a super easy one. Pichu got absolutely nerfed to the ground. This character is not super good anymore. Went from being arguably the best character in the game to the way they are now. And I do think that Pichu would have always gotten worse, even without the nerfs, just because the character is so light and the self-damage always is going to hurt him. But they just made the self-damage so much more, as well as nerfing a couple of his best moves, which led him to being not super popular in the meta today. I'd say the best current Pichu would go to Nader Yu, who just had arguably his best performance ever with a 13th place at UFA, where he was able to beat Modsai, Longo, and most notably MKLeo, and he's just been on an upward string in general. I also want to give a shout out to Niatono. Even though he doesn't play Pichu too much anymore, he still does have that character in his back pocket, and whenever he pulls it out, it looks pretty insane. Our next character is going to be Wario, and he did take a pretty significant nerf, like to the point where if Wario didn't get nerfed, I think Lucina would probably be the best player in the world if it was just him and the way he's playing right now with pre-patch Wario. That character was pretty ridiculous, but I don't think that's the main reason why Wario has seen a little bit of a drop-off, and I think that's just because 3 of the 4 Wario reps just dropped the character. And it's not like those players aren't getting good results. Those players are Zachary, Tweak, and Kameme, who are all arguably top 20 in the world, but they all just stopped using him. To be fair, they all have completely different character lineups, but it is a little bit telling that Wario isn't in either 3 of them. And then obviously the best Wario rep is still Gluttony. I don't think that's ever going to change. And even though Wario's definitely not as relevant as he used to be, he's still a very solid character. Like, it's not a Pichu situation. Next up, you're going to have Joker, and Joker did get nerfed. Most of the characters on this list got nerfed, though, but I do think that the meta shift hurts Joker a little bit, especially with Sonic becoming a much more prevalent character. Sonic is one of, if not Joker's, worst matchups, and he pretty much did not exist for the first part of Smash Ultimate. Like, there were no Sonic players in the top 50 for the first season, so that character rising to prominence definitely hurts Joker a little bit, and just the amount of work that you need to put into Joker isn't enough return that you're getting from playing some other characters. Now, don't get it twisted. Joker is still very good. Even if he is falling off on a lot of people's tier list, he's falling off to be like a top 20 character. Putting him lower than that would be pretty insane, but he's not that top 1 undisputed character like he used to be, and the gun nerfs definitely hurt that, but I think the amount of time and the meta shifts hurt him honestly a little bit more, and the 2 big Joker players that I can think of are MKLeo and Tsubaki, and it's one of those situations where I do think that Tsubaki is the best Joker, just the way that he plays the character, and his usage of guns specifically I think is incredible, but you cannot deny how good MKLeo is with this character, and also he's just an insanely good player. I mean, he could play half the cast and be the best rep, and while his Joker isn't as practiced as Tsubaki, it is still insanely good, and I would have them in contention for being the best. Next up is going to be Palutena, and the Palutena nerfs hurt her a lot, because the great thing about Palutena is her neutral's super easy, and she's able to rack on that damage like it's nothing, but she struggles for a kill. That didn't used to be the case. She used to have a lot of very strong kill confirms, and whether it be the fact that they just nerfed her grab, so now down throw into back air isn't a true thing, or people are getting better at DIing down tilt outward, so they're not getting confirmed into that true backer. Palutena just doesn't have as many kill confirms, which is what is hurting her as a character, and because of that, she is less popular in the current meta. Now, she is still a pretty popular character, but it's a really weird situation where I feel like Palutena in tournament kind of reflects Palutena on the rankings, and let me explain what I mean by that. Palutena in tournament, her main flaw is, yes, she is a consistent character. She's a character that you're almost always going to get out of pools with if you're just a decent player, because she doesn't have any unwinnable matchups, or at least too many of them, but it's really hard for her to get deep in the bracket, and that's kind of what we're seeing on the rankings as well. There's a lot of very good Palutena players. I think the best one is definitely Jagaimo, but Luis is really good, Chag is really good, Yuno is really good, Raflo is really good, and that's just to name a couple, but you don't see as many of those players getting high on the rankings. So the Palutena players, they're definitely still there, and they're definitely still making waves, but they're just not as big of a waves as the character used to do. Our next character is going to be Amar, and this is a character that kind of has the worst of both worlds. Not only did he get nerfed significantly, and I mean significantly, by the way, one of the hardest nerfs in this game, but the current day top tiers, whether they're new characters from Fighter Pass 2 or characters that just rose to prevalence, do super well into Amar. I'm going to show you the Buzz matchup chart right here, and as you can see, you have Cloud, Rob, and Sonic all beating the character fairly hard. You have Steve, Aegis, and Min Min all doing pretty well, and Amar does still have a couple decent matchups against relevant characters like Game & Watch, Snake, Samus. He's not a bad character by any means, but he went from being like arguably the best character in the game to, I would say, probably borderline top 30 with a bunch of struggle matchups just rising to prevalence. And I'd say the best Olimar rep right now is kind of a tough one, because when dabuz and Shuton are playing Olimar, I would give it to one of them, probably Shuton, but they don't often whip the character out, and Myron has kind of gone into retirement, so I'd say the best Olimar player that is actively playing Olimar like pretty much every single tournament would be Noi. Even though he does have a PT secondary as well, Olimar does take a lot of those bracket hits. And I will say, there's still a lot of very good Olimar players out there right now, especially in Japan. There's so many amazing Olimars, but the nerfs and especially the meta shifts have definitely hurt this character. Our next character is going to be Inkling, and she did receive a couple nerfs, but she also received a couple buffs, and ultimately, I don't think that's the reason that she fell off, and it's not even the meta shift, even though the newer top tiers do pretty well versus Inkling, and she doesn't fare super well in the Fighter Pass 2. The reason that Inkling fell off is because this character just isn't very good. If you're looking through the lens of day one Smash Ultimate, you have Inkling, a character with amazing neutral, and she still has some very good neutral. Really easy bread and butter, super good edge guarding and ledge trapping, as well as two of the best kill confirms in the game with up throw into up air as well as side B, but side B gets a little bit of a nerf. People are aware of their up throw up air percent, so they start avoiding that, and they start looking out for roller, and all of a sudden Inkling players realize, how am I supposed to kill? And the answer is you're not. Inkling just has very weak killing without those two kill confirms. Unless you're getting an edge guard off stage or a super good smash attack read, you're going to have your opponents living a long time. And she just doesn't have the neutral to make up for it. Even though her neutral is good, she doesn't hit hard enough, and she just doesn't kill early enough, and that's ultimately going to be her main flaw. And I would say the best current day Inkling is between Shiryuki, Levi, and Showers. I would personally give it to Shiryuki, but I think the other two are honestly fine choices as well, because they're both amazing players. And then you also got to give a shout out to Cosmos. I don't even know if he's actually going to go back to Inkling, but if he does, maybe he can save the character, because Lord knows she needs it. Our next character is going to be Wolf, and he's honestly doing really well. If you look at the latest rendition of the Ether rank, you have 3 Wolf players in the top 50, being Jackal, Masha, and Ouch. And by the way, I do think that Ouch is the best Wolf. And if you look at the first ever PGR, there was only 1 Wolf main, but you had more Wolf appearances because the character was a very popular secondary, and that's where Wolf has fallen off a little bit. You look back at the first PGR, Leo had a pocket Wolf, Tweak had a pocket Wolf, Void had a pocket Wolf, your mom had a pocket Wolf. This was just a very easy character to secondary, and he's still a good secondary nowadays, but there are just better choices. Wolf isn't a super hard character, but why play Wolf as your secondary when you can have a Cloud, or Rob, or Game & Watch, or Steve? There's just so many better choices to have as a secondary, and while I still think that Wolf is pretty much the same as a solo main, even with the nerfs, I think the character's use as a secondary has gone way down, but he's still overall pretty good. Our next character is going to be Peach, and I honestly think this is a character that was kind of just destined to not be super popular at the top level, and I'm honestly surprised there were so many Peaches when the game first came out, and the reason for that was because that character was absolutely broken, and those nerfs definitely hurt her, as well as the meta did shift away from Peach for sure. You look at Sonic and Game Watch, for example, those are Peach's worst 2 matchups, and they went from not existing at the start of the game to being incredibly prevalent nowadays, but I think the ultimate big bad reason that Peach isn't as popular as she used to be is because the character is just so hard. There's so many other pop tiers that could do what Peach does, maybe even do what she does better, that have to put in a third of the work. So a lot of those Peach players were kind of just discouraged. They were weeded out. And there are a couple people that still stuck around with this character and still get amazing results. Umeki and Mutace, for example, those are definitely your top two Peaches right now. And I would say that Mutace is still the best Peach in the world, even though he did underperform Mutace at port priority, but that's just one tournament. Back on track though, and I just want to get this out of the way. When the game first came out, every single character was at their floor, and Peach is a character that, even though she has IMO, the highest ceiling in the game, her floor is still pretty good because she hits like a truck and she has amazing neutral. But as the game progresses, people were able to more consistently hit the other characters' ceilings and get to the peak, whereas it's a lot more work to be able to do that with Peach, and ultimately, I think that's one of the things that hurt her the most. Our next character is going to be Snake, and I'm not going to spend too much time on here because Snake is better than he used to be. He technically got a nerf because grenades do less damage on shield now, but honestly, I think that's a bit of a buff for the character, and a lot of his super bad matchups aren't as popular anymore. I think Snake's worst matchups are Game & Watch, Inkling, Joker, and Mega Man, and Game & Watch is super prevalent, but those other three are nowhere near as good as they used to be in the current meta. And in terms of who the best Snake is, I definitely think it's Hurt right now, but Apollo Kage is close, and Dio's fairly close, and there's 30 other Snake players I can name because the character is doing extremely well. Our final character is going to be Lucina, and she suffers in the same aspects that Wolf does, in my opinion, where she's just not as useful as a secondary anymore. When the game first came out, Lucina was the secondary. You look at the PGR, you had 2 people who main Lucina and 5 people using her as a secondary character. Whereas nowadays, you can pick Cloud, or you can pick Aegis, you can pick Roy, you can pick Korn. Those are just for the sword characters that you can pick as your secondary, and there's a bunch of other great choices as well. And she's ultimately just getting power crept for that role where she was so good at the start of the game, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot less of her. It also doesn't help that her best rep by far was Proto Bonham, and he's taken a massive step back. I also want to give shoutouts to Mr. E and Leon, the EU one, obviously, because I do think that they are very good, and Mr. E specifically has had some pretty incredible highs with this character, and when he's playing well, he looks absolutely absurd, but you're just not seeing Lucina as often anymore because the character just isn't as good of a secondary. And in group block, I can't believe I forgot to mention this, but Fighter Pass 2 also definitely hurt Lucina. She doesn't do super great into Sora, Kazuya, Steve, Min, or Aegis for that matter. So that's definitely something that hinders her a little bit. But as I said earlier on, her main usage was as a secondary, and there's just better choices now. So now that we've gone over all the characters, I'm going to be ranking them from worst to best relative to how they used to be doing compared to how they're doing now. Starting off with our worst character, which is going to be Pichu. Again, this character absolutely fell off the cliffs. I think that the meta would have naturally shifted away from Pichu, and the nerfs definitely did not help. At number 9, you're going to have Inkling. Pretty much the exact same thing as Pichu, just not to the exact extremes, and he also didn't get nerfed nearly as hard. You're going to have Amar at number 8. I think this one is also a little bit just because the top 3 Amar reps just either don't play or aren't playing Amar anymore, which definitely doesn't help the character, but he is still a fairly popular character. You're just not seeing him reaching the same highs. At 7, you're going to have Wario. You still have Lucina hitting similar highs with the character, but he's just not as popular because you don't see him being used as a secondary nearly as much. At number 6, you're going to have Lucina, and I could see her being moved down, honestly, just because of how many Lucinas used to have at the start of the game. And it's not like Lucina players have completely disappeared because the character is still pretty good, but she's just definitely not as popular. And as I've already mentioned, she's just not the go-to secondary anymore. You're going to have Joker. I think that this character is still extremely good, and you still have representation at the top level. And it's not like there are a million Joker players running around, but there's definitely not as many Jokers, and difficulty has not helped that. At number 4, you're going to have Palutena, and she's still a fairly popular character, but you're just not seeing her in the top 8s like you used to. She's not hitting the same highs that she used to hit, but outside of that, you're looking at data below the top 16. She's probably doing just as well as she used to. At number 3, you're going to have Peach. Now, obviously, losing your top rep hurts, but you can say that about Palutena, you can say that about Peach, you can say that about Snake, all for different reasons, of course, but at the end of the day, you lose one of your best players, it's not going to be as good for your character. But there were 3 solo main Peaches at the start of Smash Ultimate. One of them got banned, 2 of them are still active, and those 2 players are still within the top 50, and that's kind of what I expected of this character. As I mentioned earlier on the video, I'm very surprised there were even that many Peaches initially, but that's just because the character was absolutely broken, and I think Peach is still doing absolutely fine in the meta. Peach's peaks and valleys in 2023 are similar to what they were in 2019 and the early game meta, so I'm going to say that Peach is at number 3. At number 2, you're going to have Wolf. Even though this character is not nearly as good as a co-main or a secondary anymore, there's arguably more Wolf mains that are doing super well right now than there were in the early game meta, and the most improved character, the character that has stood the test of time above all else, is going to be Snake, who has not only gotten better, but is still getting better, and there are still more Snake mains that are coming out of the woodworks and getting crazy results. And I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The support has been absolutely unreal. If there's anything I got wrong, left out, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below and let me know what characters y'all would have chosen for this list. Again, it's kind of tough to say which are the most dominant characters of the early game meta, but I feel like this was a fine metric to go by. And yeah, that's all I got to say. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.